developers, the engineers, or whoever is your product developer work together and collaborate on documentation, they might very well have a private wiki. And you can select as many of these as you may have, so we will have probably a pretty significant amount of overlap there. So I'll give you another 15 seconds or so to kind of fill this out, and then let's take a look and see what kind of results we get here. All right, I'm going to close the poll, and let's take a look at the results. So, nearly 50% have a corporate blog, over 50% have a private wiki, and then it drops off from there. 40% public forums, private forums, and a public wiki seems to be the one that sort of scares people. So that's really, really actually kind of interesting. And I have one note in here that says that somebody clicked the wrong button, but I think we had enough respondents that it probably would just have a minimal change. So something interesting to look at. Clearly the public wiki is scary, but even a corporate blog, which would to some extent expose you to questions and people questioning and challenging, seems, 50% is pretty good, but it's certainly not 80 or 90%. So, okay, now over in the questions tab, I do have a question about permutations of keywords. How many permutations of keywords would you recommend, going back to the search question? Excuse me. It really depends. That's the answer that the consultant always gives. It really depends. But how much content do you have? How many permutations do you need to be effective? I would take a look at trying to find somebody that is trained in information science and taxonomy, and getting help from them, especially if you have large amounts of content and large amounts of information that you need to manage in this area. That said, because Google is so fast, it's actually relatively easy to roll this stuff out and try some different things and see what happens. If right now your stuff doesn't show up at all, then there's not really any danger in experimenting with keywords to see what works. So that, by way of saying, it's a good question. I don't have a good answer because I don't know that there is a really straightforward kind of answer. So, okay. So I'm going to hide the poll and move on here. So strategy number 2 is related to what we were just talking about, which is that I believe it is important to provide community infrastructure. Things like blogs, things like public forums, and potentially public wikis if you can, get yourself there. So community infrastructure. Now, one reason that you really need to do this has to do with a competitive sort of thing. I wanted to give you an example of this. I don't know how many of you are familiar with wonderful knitting and crocheting kinds of things. But I wanted to give you an idea of what's going on here. There is not a community that's known for being particularly techy, which is kind of worth pointing out. This website is Lion Brand Yarn, which is a pretty well-known company in the yarn industry. They sell in places like Michael's and Joann's, very sort of mass-market-y kinds of stuff. They have a community section on their website, and they do have a blog. And they have some other things going on here. So they do have some community. Okay? However, you'll notice that there are a couple of comments down here. There are 3 comments on this particular blog entry. And, oh, sorry, I've sort of scrolled down. Anyway, they do have a blog. They have a customer gallery. They have some places where people can show what they've done. However, what they're doing here in terms of community runs not even a distant second. It is nowhere close to what you will see on a community site called Ravelry. And just out of curiosity, if any of you that are on this call are actually on Ravelry, I'd be very interested in seeing that. I'm discovering that it's a common thing among TechCom people. So Ravelry is a community site, It is an independent site, not affiliated with any particular yarn maker, pattern maker, anything like that. It's just a third-party kind of site. And you'll notice that I brought this up this morning, maybe an hour ago. There are 2,400 people currently on this site. It has a disturbing number of forums. These are just the forums that I'm subscribed to. There are far, far, far more than this that are out there. Lots and lots of posts, lots of activity going on. I mean, there's just lots of stuff happening here. There are people. There are yarns. Now, Lion Brand, right? So over here we have the most popular yarns ranked by how many people have put them on here and associated them with a particular project. And if you go click on Lion Brand yarn in this case, you will see that Ravelry enables comments on the yarn. Now, if you're Lion Brand, this strikes fear in your heart, or it should, because you are going to get people commenting on the yarn and saying, I like it, I don't like it, you know, favorite cheap woolen acrylic, you know, is that how you want to be described? Perhaps. So, you know, here's one it's a pretty positive comment. But if you look down here under comment number 6, they talk about pilling, which is when those little things come off and it just looks icky. So there are some, you know, positive comments, some not so positive comments. Splitting the yarn, not something that you want. So, you know, look at this one down here, comment number 10. The general gist is it's cheap. The price is right, and that makes people, you know, somewhat happy. But there's no control here on the part of the company that owns the brand over what people are going to say about the yarn. And the community that is built on Ravelry is far, far, far more compelling than what is available on the corporate site. And so people have migrated to the more compelling version. So my advice is to provide community infrastructure, because if you don't, somebody else probably will, and if they get critical mass, then people are going to congregate there, and you will have no way really of controlling or directing, because control, let me tell you, control is over. You have no way of directing that conversation or even having moderate sort of influence on it. So if you provide forums, and it looks as though many of you do, then the corporate role is basically to organize, to provide categories of discussion. You might have a tech support forum and a product, new product enhancement request forum and a bug reporting forum and a, various other things. You might have something about actually how to use the product. If you were selling aquariums, you might have something about water problems. You might have something about choosing fish, and you might have, those kinds of things. But the corporate role needs to be to sort of provide that organizational scheme and help people figure out what the organizational scheme should be. That would be one. Another one would be to moderate. Now, when you moderate, now this is of course something that every corporation has to decide for itself, but when you moderate, I do not mean that you get to shut things down and delete negative comments. Again, if people make a negative comment and it gets deleted, they will migrate to some place where that negative comment will not get deleted and have lots of fun on the equivalent of untied.com for your organization. Moderation means that when people start posting links to porn sites, you might want to delete those. If you make some rules about ad hominem attacks, about personal attacks, you might need to delete comments that are purely personal attacks. We very, very rarely delete comments on our blog. We delete a lot of spam, but we very rarely delete comments on our blog. But we had one